All right, guys, welcome back to a new episode of I guess this isn't really a conflict update, it's more so of the special. The war in Ukraine is kind of on a standstill right now because Russia has basically overextended after they captured Lysychansk, and they have really no power. So they said they're on a tactical pause, basically like they're out of supplies, so they can't really push any further. Um, but yeah, so I thought I would do a special with covering NATO and what's next for it after the newest members, Finland and Sweden, officially become members. The way it's happened so far is they've gotten, 7 countries out of the 28 it needs. So progress is happening. Just a couple days ago, we had Albania and Germany join, and we should be seeing others soon. I'm surprised the U.S. isn't up there, but I know the Senate works slow, so we'll see how that happens. But anyways, we're not talking about Finland, Sweden, because they're already basically members now that their beef with Turkey is covered, and Germany's like all for them now. We're going to be covering countries that could potentially join NATO next. Now, I wanted to highlight a few and also explain why some countries are more likely than others. So, to start, I think a great example would probably be Austria. They're known for their neutrality, but then again, so is Sweden and Finland. Austria is part of the EU and specifically has the EU military defense agreement in its constitution. So this basically allows Austria to kind of be more pro of the defense side. Now, an interesting part about this is that Austria also has neutrality written in their constitutions, unlike Sweden and Finland. And there hasn't been a lot of talk. I'll show you the section on it. So Austria only joined the EU in 1995 together. The Nordic countries declared neutrality in the Cold War. So Sweden and Finland, notice those two countries obviously changed their agreement. Austria is already in the PFP, which is Partnership for Peace, participates in the Euro-Atlantic Partnership Council. They also participate in the UN peacekeeping operations, and it's led 4-year missions, basically. And then conservative politicians like Andres Kohl, the 2016 nomination for the OVP, has argued in favor of NATO membership, and this was recent. And then Chancellor Wolfgang Schott also supported NATO membership. And however, it's rejected the idea of opening Austria's neutrality. Membership's not widely popular with the Austrian public. So this was a survey done in light of the invasion. Only 14% of Austrians supported joining NATO. 75% were opposed. So that's a big issue. And that's not something that'll be covered lightly. The next country I think could probably join NATO, but not anytime recently. Let me see if I can find a map. Is Bosnia. I think actually Bosnia is the most likely and potentially the only country this decade will see join NATO unless something drastic happens. The issue with Bosnia is that Bosnia is actually not just Bosnia, it's Bosnia and Herzegovina. And let's see if they show it on the Ukraine live UA map. So as you can see, Bosnia, hang on, maybe I can find a better map without having to Google it. Go to Europe, go to Balkans. Here we go. So it doesn't really show. Oh, here it does. It does show a lot better. So Bosnia is basically two separate entities. There's Bosnia and there's the Republic of Srpska, which is the Serbian-run part of Bosnia. This was how it was created post-Yugoslavian breakup to kind of control it. And this is what a lot of the tension is. The Bosnian part is pretty in favor of joining NATO and has a huge support coming from Turkey, because Turkey obviously supports the Muslims wanting to join. That's why they supported Albania, and that's why they're a little bit more pro-Kosovo. The problem with it, though, is the Serbian part does not want to. And what's preventing Bosnia from joining NATO, just like Macedonia did last year and Montenegro did a few years before that, and then Croatia, Slovenia, and Albania did in 2014 for the Adriatic Channel, is that the Serbian part is strictly against NATO. So Serbia's kind of been supporting the Republic of Srpska to become more autonomous because they hate Bosnia, they hate Bosnians. So there's a lot of tension there, which prevents it. Now, this is something that can be fixed. If I go to the Bosnia section, I'm surprised. Where is it? So 2017 poll showed that 59% of the country supports NATO memberships, but is dependent on the ethnic group, like I said. So 84% who identify as Bosniak or Croat supported the NATO membership. Only 9% who identified as Serbian did. The reason for this is because when the Yugoslav breakup happened, there was a lot of conflict that was coming out of that. And you saw this specifically in the Serbian Bosnia regions. There was a lot of genocide that happened, a lot of issues there. So we will see what happens in the coming years. But with this new invasion, there's been renewed calls for them to join, like with the rest of the Balkans. If Bosnia joins, which I think, hopefully I can say when Bosnia joins, Serbia will basically be surrounded. And their only ally, Russia, is all the way over there dealing with an invasion here. So that's something to take note of. I think Bosnia is the most likely candidate and only realistic candidate right now for NATO. And I know what people are going to say. Oh, Alex, what about Ukraine? They want NATO membership. Yeah, they do. And unfortunately to them, right now, they're not going to get it because of the not only war with Russia. NATO doesn't want to be involved in a direct war with Russia right now. It's also the ethnic tension that they have with Crimea and the two DNR, LNR republics here. And until these issues are resolved with Crimea and with the Donbass, there's not going to be a resolve for Ukraine to become part of NATO. That's just how it works. I'm not going to cover this too much because it's very known out there that Ukraine can't become a NATO member until everything is handled there. And then that's the same reason for Moldova and Georgia. Moldova, because of the Transnistrian Republic, which is its own issue. Moldova cannot reunite with Romania if they wanted to, or join NATO if they wanted to, because of the Transnistrian Republic preventing them from taking, or the Transnistrian Republic basically being independent, being a border dispute with Moldova. Moldova can't, because Transnistria is guaranteed by Russia. Russia has an army there. It's not an army, it's like a few thousand troops, and most of them are probably Transnistrian at this point because they haven't really left the country since 1990, so it's 30 years of occupation there. And then Georgia, with the 2008 invasion of South Ossetia and Abkhazia, this resulted in Georgia having the same issue with Ukraine and Moldova, having these Russian-run republics that prevent them from joining because of border disputes. Azerbaijan has also been mentioned in the past as a potential candidate. I'm not going to cover them too much because, frankly, they're authoritarian and they also still have their border dispute with the Karabakh Republic, which Armenia has some control over, even though it's more autonomous. And then Serbia, like I mentioned, never going to join NATO, probably. They hate the idea of NATO because of what they did in the 90s, bombing them and killing a lot of people. So that's not going to be likely. Kosovo could be a potential member in the future. When I cover the Bosnia, the president of Kosovo called on NATO to speed up the membership for Kosovo and Bosnia, also criticized Dodik for destroying the unity of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Anyways, the issue with Kosovo is kind of a unique one because they would be a prime candidate if they were recognized by the world. Right now, Russia and China does not recognize them, but most of the West do. So whenever Kosovo becomes a fully internationally recognized country, and that also has to be with Serbia recognizing them, which probably won't happen. As soon as Serbia recognizes them, Russia will. Kosovo will not be a NATO member. They'll just be kind of an ally, I guess you'd say, to NATO, which makes it pretty hard for them to join NATO until they're recognized diplomatically. Belarus obviously never going to join pro-Russia unless something happens. And if Belarus does invade Ukraine, like people have theorized, and then the people revolt and kick out Lukashenko, Belarus becomes pro-Western, then there could be a chance that they join within the next decade or two. The issue with that, though, is Russia would never allow that because that would extend their border, which they already have to deal with a new Finland pushing on their border. So they might just pull Ukraine, invade, the eastern half of the country and say they're protecting the Russian minority there if Lukashenko is ever pushed out. Cyprus talked about in the past about joining NATO, very pro-NATO back in towards their beginning of their independence when they were close to becoming a state of Greece. Obviously, that never happened, and the north part of the island was invaded by Turkey, creating a civil war there that still lasts to this day. Border dispute, can't join NATO. Malta, neutrality in the EU, but there could be a chance in the future. Polls show it's not likely, so I don't see Malta joining the NATO alliance anytime soon, unless there was a lot of diplomatic leeway that pushed them to that. I think there's actually a chapter on that here. This is a good Wikipedia article. I'll put it in the description. Yeah, so 65% of the island supported the island's neutrality, 6% opposed, but they would want greater military cooperation within the European Union. So former British colony, you'd expect to be a little bit more pro NATO, but they pulled out when they got independence and kind of gone their own way. So yeah, that's Malta. Ireland's the same way. They're very neutral. They're not going to join anytime soon. And they are prohibited from joining alliance in their constitution. A poll showed 37% favor joining NATO, 52% opposed. And then at the end of March, found a sharp rise, 48%, 38 opposing. So there is chance. That's definitely an interesting poll I didn't see before. If they do join, then that could be good for them. Ireland definitely has a great fighting force. There's a great movie on Ireland fighting in the Congo for a UN peacekeeping force. I thought it was really good and interesting and showed how advanced their fighting force was. So, yeah, that's basically most of Europe. I think I've covered. Like Switzerland, obviously never going to join NATO. Andorra, San Marino, Monaco, no reason to join NATO. Too small, won't provide anything really for the alliance. Israel, I guess theoretically, maybe if they wanted to expand into Asia, it would be an interesting argument to expand NATO beyond what NATO is considered. Problem with Israel, obviously, is the Palestine issue, which still is yet to be addressed. Armenia, never going to join NATO because they're pretty pro-Russia right now. Russia, obviously, kind of pissed off a lot of people, so they're not going to join. And then the only other area I could ever see maybe expanding in the future is Mexico. Colombia actually joked around in 2011 and said was curious about NATO membership, which does bring up an interesting question. Can South and Central America apply to become NATO members? Because NATO is, North Atlantic, and this is the Atlantic. So I don't know. Let's see. I think there's, here it is. In 2013, stated its hopes result in NATO membership. And then, so. And then, I didn't even know this. Wow, I'm learning as I go. I probably should have done more research, but I just decided to crank out a video on a Saturday. So Trump made Brazil a major non-NATO ally and expressed support for the eventual accession of Brazil into NATO. Could not seek to become a global partner of NATO like Colombia. I I think this is a very convoluted issue when it comes to South America, and it's one that hasn't fully been addressed yet. I could see Mexico, but with whoever's in charge, or with AMLO in charge of Mexico, I don't see that happening. If you get a conservative in charge of Mexico again, maybe they'll be a little bit more pro NATO ascension. And then there's just all these Caribbean countries wouldn't provide much for NATO, and Central America wouldn't provide much for NATO. Colombia would be, but they just elected a leftist president who's pretty anti-US in a way, so I don't see that happening anytime soon. Guyana would be interesting as a NATO member to counter Venezuela, but with their border dispute that literally goes down here, you can see marked, it's not going to happen anytime soon. So, yeah, I think that covers about every country in Europe or extend abroad who could apply for NATO. I thank you guys all for watching. I look forward to making more videos on the war in Ukraine when there's actual updates. Right now, it's at standstill, so I can't really produce anything. But yeah, see you guys.